We are live. This is fantastic. I do these events twice a month now for the Sabian Education Network, and Joe Bergamini organizes these for me. And we talk about who we want to have on the shows, and it's just so fantastic. And today, I've got an old friend and a dear, dear friend and a fantastic, fantastic player and educator. Would you please welcome Mr. Mark Powers? Thank you so much, Mark, for being here.
Dom, thanks, man. This is great to get to catch up again.
This is great, Mark. We have these incredible interviews that we do, and these on StreamYard go live on Facebook and YouTube, so they're here forever. And I want to make sure that we showcase and spotlight players like yourself, who I am so impressed with what you're doing with not only the studio that you have, I want to get into the self-publishing end of what you're doing with the books that you have, how great you play and what you're doing. So let's kind of go back to the beginning and give these people a little bit of history. Just talk about, how old you were when you got involved with drumming and what sparked you.
Oh, I got involved when I was 10 years old, playing in fifth grade band, kind of starting out. And for me, honestly, I'm not sure what made drums one of the two interests, but when I started out just before band, you got to do the old music instrument petting zoo sort of thing in the school cafeteria where you go and try out a bunch of instruments. And I remember having interest in drums and trumpet. But the interesting thing, and maybe the backwards sounding sort of thing, is that my mother at the time actually pushed me towards the drums for two reasons. Number one, because at that point in time, drums were less expensive because you're investing in a $25 pair of sticks and practice pad rather than a couple $100 for a trumpet. And number two, because the drums were actually quieter in that situation too. You're not getting a drum set or a snare yet. You're just getting that practice pad instead of this blatty trumpet. And she was sure that this whole music thing was going to be another one of my quickly passing interests. And I was going to get over it quickly. So might as well invest $25 instead of, a couple $100. And now these days, I'm kind of wondering if I shouldn't have gone the other direction and, invested in one really great horn and never had to buy another one rather than all the money I've dumped into gear my whole life.
When you think about that decision of how we got involved with drums and the amount of drums and the snare drums and the cymbals of what we have collected, it really is overwhelming at that point.
Yep.
So you started taking some lessons at a certain age?
Yeah, I started in school band doing the concert band thing. So playing timpani and snare drum, bass drum, all of that. And I only did lessons once in a while. I was in the state of Wisconsin, and WSMA, the State School Music Association, has always had a really strong solo and ensemble competition program there. Yeah. So that was something I was pushed into doing early on. And I would take lessons normally just leading up to one of those situations. We weren't in a position to just be taking lessons constantly, but I would get a piece of music that I would have to prepare for solo. So I would get lessons from a local teacher. And it wasn't until I was 16 that I started taking lessons more regularly. Actually, at that point, I had started playing drum set a couple of years prior with my garage band buddies. And at the age of 16, I got out of high school a couple of years early. Convoluted, crazy story. But I left home and I moved to Minneapolis, where I actually started going to school at what then was called Music Tech, a little vocational music school that later became the McNally Smith College of Music in St. Paul. And so I started studying with David Stanek, Paul Stuber, Gordy Knutson, just a bunch of great players who were all teachers at that school.
Well, I know Dave up there, who's just was a phenomenal educator up there, and of course Gordy too. So you really kind of hooked up with some great players at a young age. But it seems like the school music program, the band program, was pretty important for you, right?
Yeah, it totally was. Quick aside, Dave Stanek texted me right before this and said to make sure to send you a hello. So I got to get that in there. Dave was one of the most important figures in my drumming life. But yeah, the school music program was really valuable. In my family, regarding music, we had two rules. And it was that you had to try an instrument. That was just kind of a parental rule in my family. You didn't have to stick with it, but you had to try something. And then number two, you had to not only try, but be in choir all the way through school. So my family really pushed the vocal sides of things. But getting involved with music, as everybody knows, is just a great thing because of the community you get sucked into. And at that age, I think that was something that I really latched onto. You kind of become one of the band geeks and be surrounded by people that are into things that you're into. And then with Wisconsin at that time having such a strong solo and ensemble competition program, it really on a regular basis put you in a position that you had to push yourself a little bit more. So you weren't able to just simply be in a concert band program and squeak by without having to constantly be improving your skills. So it was very valuable to me.
Well, it's kind of interesting because now the school music programs are being challenged big time as far as not having the budgets and not having the support from the school system. And I think a lot of kids are losing out on the arts. They talk about STEM, STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. Well, I always say that should be STEAM. The arts should be in there for sure.
No, I totally agree. And to be totally honest, the fact that so many schools are lacking those programs is one of the reasons that lots of schools have hired me to come in as artists in residence and do assemblies and longer programs. I just got back from being in Nebraska for 2 weeks teaching at a school over there. So I do a lot of those where I'm not teaching or playing drum set. I'm normally teaching either West African percussion because I'd studied in Ghana, West Africa for a while. So I take some of those instruments in. Or in Nebraska recently, Vic Firth hooked them up with several hundred pair of drumsticks, and a local store hooked them up with a couple hundred buckets. And we were just working on bucket drumming skills. And that is something, just the arts in general, like you said, are so lacking in schools these days. There are, thankfully, small organizations, little funding organizations and arts councils that have stepped up to try to fill that void wherever they can in little ways.
Boy, so it sounds like you were studying with some phenomenal educators, and I know Marv Dahlgren and Elliot Fine are a couple of fantastic people that you were able to meet also.
Yeah, I wish that I would have gotten to study with Elliot, but he is just hands down one of the funniest humans on the planet. I loved Elliot to death. I miss that guy. But I also really miss Marv, who I did while I was at Music Tech. I got to study with him a bit. He would teach some large group classes, and you would go through one of his books. Some of them were actually published books, and some were books that he had handwritten and probably taken to Kinko's and printed out and got a little spiral binding on them. But if you stayed with him through the semester and worked on his book, then you got to keep the book for free. And getting to work with him was just amazing. That guy is just such an incredible player. And he would be teaching you some crazy stuff out of his 4-way coordination book, and then take off to go to a local airport and teach some other pilot how to do like barrel rolls or something. He was like a crazy pilot and flight instructor as well. Just an amazing man.
And that book, 4-Way Coordination by Marv Dahlgren and Elliot Fine, is just, it's just in the drumming culture so deep. It's such an important book.
Oh, it is sitting right behind me on the floor as part of my practice rotation. Every few days, I end up working on pages of that book. It's one of those classics, what I call one of the canons of the drummer's Bible, that you're never going to master. You can always be going back and developing in different ways and improving upon.
Big time. Well, I get out of the minds of Marv and Elliot, and the fact that from their grave they are still inspiring us and teaching us. That's the power of two dedicated players and two dedicated educators.
Yeah, incredible guys.
Well, that's fantastic. So what's happening? So you're starting to play with bands at this time, or you're starting to kind of network out, and you're studying and playing, or you're meeting other musicians?
Yeah, I played with a couple of bands while I was going to school there in the Twin Cities area, but I would say got busier kind of as a jobber, starting to randomly pick up gigs with people around the time that I left college there, and a little bit of stuff around the Twin Cities in Minnesota. But my family was in Wisconsin, so I migrated back that way, and that's where I started getting busier. And I ended up moving between a couple of cities, moved to a place in central Wisconsin, the town of Wausau, where I just got a good teaching gig. So I was there for a while, and then started playing with some musicians in the Oshkosh, Wisconsin area, which was a great place to be based out of for several years because of its location. It was easy to get to Green Bay or Madison or Milwaukee to play shows, or even back to Minneapolis once in a while. so I was there for quite a few years, and that was really where it was around that time that I walked out of my last job deciding that this music thing was going to be the thing that I did, and had my boss going, you know what, that's not smart. You're really starting to do well here. You've got, great future ahead of you. Like, the music thing might not be such a good idea. And I remember leaving going, yeah, I know, but I got to go do it. And I've never looked back since.
Well, if you get a chance, call that guy back and let him know that he was wrong. Absolutely. So you go in there. So now you get involved in some teaching. So talk about your studio, what you have here. You've got a phenomenal studio here that you put together. You recently bought a house and you built the studio and you made it happen.
Yeah. My wife and I bought a house last January, right before the pandemic, which was certainly the best and worst possible time to buy a house. All of a sudden, all musician income just disappears for a little bit until we all kind of scrambled and figured out how to rebuild all that. But at the same time, I was home and available to do work. Yeah. So the room that I'm in now was planned to be a studio at some point anyway, but it definitely would not have turned into one as quickly as it did under the circumstances. Definitely a drummer having a home studio is a luxury, but once the pandemic set in and all work disappeared, it became a necessity. Really had to have something. So yeah, I kind of called up a really good buddy, a sound engineer who I work with regularly, and he is just incredible general handyman, has a know-how, everything when it comes to this, and I had very little. So got together, and I had the plan of what I wanted to do to the room, and he knew how to make those things happen. So he would come over and educate me and get me started on projects, and definitely manually helped do quite a bit of the labor himself. But yeah, we took a standard bedroom, kind of went the whole 9 yards, blocked out a window, used resilient channel on the walls to create a little airspace, put up 5/8 drywall, some asphalt roofing material on top of that, another layer of 5/8 drywall, and then all of the sound absorption and things as well. And added a second door, added one wall to insulate between the room and it's the only interior wall, so it's insulate from the rest of the house. Raised the floor up a little bit. So we really did quite a bit of work, and it's great because now, I have a space that I can not only teach lessons in virtually, but also I can continue a lot of my recording work that I've done all along, but just can do it from home here.
So you have foam, or is it foam or sound panels that are on the walls there?
Yeah, I have a bunch of Orlex products. So I have bass traps in the corners, which you can't entirely see where we're at here. But you got bass traps and then sound foam in different configurations around the room. And yeah, really, really deadened up the room a lot. I mean, all of the initial work you're doing with the walls is to really help reduce how much sound is leaving the space.
Right.
And then once that's all done, you're still in a little bit of an echo chamber of a box. The putting in an additional door at an angle helped a little bit because it removes a little bit of the parallel wall surfaces. But after that, then you go into the internal kind of sound absorption and sound control work. So the Orlex stuff really helped a lot with that.
Boy, it's amazing what you've done there, and you got the room set up. Your drums are in there. So now talk about some of the online lessons and what you're doing, because you're doing private lessons, you're doing master classes. Just talk about that, how you set that up.
Yeah, I'm doing online lessons now. At the beginning, when the pandemic set in, that was something I definitely was not prepared for. I mean, guys like you have been doing this long before it was cool, and I was not in the slightest bit prepared for it. So I remember when things started shutting down, I contacted all of my private students, which I used to drive to a music store to teach. And I said, you know what, let's take this week off. We'll figure things out next week. And then the next week came around and I said, let's take this week off. We'll figure things out next week. And by about week 3, I realized if I don't find a way to teach them online, I no longer have a teaching gig. This is something I need to do. But I really thought it was this weird short-term thing that we were somehow gonna find a fix to quickly. And so yeah, it took a while for the room to get built. So my online lessons were a little bit janky for a little while as I got things working. But now I started off with a really simple setup that was a couple of old iPhone 6s that I got at a local used technology store that was refurbished, and got them for super cheap. And they were the oldest iPhones that I could use with the app I was using to be able to connect to the computers. And I used those with OBS software that's free online, and a little what's called a Stream Deck, so switcher, so I can switch between the two cameras. And incredibly enough, with something as simple as that, where you're literally only buying this little switcher and a couple of used iPhones, you can create something that to most people is pretty impressive and professional, because using OBS, that free software on the computer, you can set it up so that a touch of the button zooms the camera to a little tighter shot. So my front camera would be wide and then zoom a little closer to me. And then my overhead camera would zoom down to just over the snare drum. So if I was on the snare pad, they could see that. And it creates this appearance that you've got multi-cameras, you got a lot of stuff going on. But it's very simple and, like, for the most part, inexpensive to get going. And I'm chatting with you from a laptop right now, not from my usual rig, because I'm right in the process of changing all of that to a setup that has a couple of Panasonic Lumix G7 cameras and a GoPro, and then switching using an ATEM Mini Pro switcher, which I know a lot of people are using these days. And so now I'll have the front facing camera and one off over my left shoulder, and still have the overhead. And then I've also got the option to add a foot camera or something, but I'm also able to just run things directly in from my iPad. So my notes I'm writing for my students, they can see on the screen and things like that.
Well, that's fantastic that you put the time into it. And I think the key thing about the educational aspect of this here is the fact that you can do this relatively inexpensively.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be overkill where you buy all the cameras. I mean, in time, if you evolve to that, that's fantastic.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I guess the thing that I skipped was my very, very, very first iteration of this whole thing. When everything came crumbling down, I realized that I needed to do it, and I didn't have a space to be making noise in yet. I had a little tiny setup with some Remo silent stroke heads that I threw on, and it was 100% free. I just used Zoom on my laptop, and then I took my already existing iPhone that I had and just plugged in and put on a microphone stand so that I could kind of get a little bit of an overhead-ish sort of view for the students, so I could switch to that. And it wasn't ideal. There were, audio and video sync issues, but I could at least get through lessons with my current students who understood that we were all undergoing this process of figuring this out together and, learning how it works. But so, yeah, you can start, just using Zoom and nothing else, and jump into it basically free, and then step up audio or video as you're able to.
Well, it really is great to hear, because I want all the teachers to understand. We've got people that are joining us from here. My gosh, Mark, we've got people from, let's go down here. We've got people from the Ukraine, from Russia. We've got people from all throughout the U.S. We've got, we've got Mexico here. We've got greetings from Oneonta, upstate New York, Bangladesh, Argentina, Quebec, Canada. So we got a handful of people that are here. Hello from Tigernese, Upper Bavaria.
Nice.
In Germany. And Bruno Muse, who's from Antwerp, Belgium. So you got a wide variety of people, and I want them all to kind of hear the fact that you stepped into this really smart. I always say, don't fear it. We have to embrace the technology. I've been doing this for over 20 some odd years, and I was doing this way when I was one of the first people on Skype to even be doing this at this point, when it was still dial-up. So you want to hear challenges. I mean, that was a whole nother world of, I used to laugh at each lesson, but it kind of worked, and people were able to communicate with me, and we got it going on until the technology caught up. And the key aspect was to get the internet to catch up. And
Yeah.
instead of having these separate modems that we had to happen, now all of the, it was built into the computer. So all this technology, and it evolves. Now I've got a 4-camera shooting here with this Blackmagic ATM ISO Mini Pro, and with my audio interface, and it works out great with the audio. So in time, they can build into it and do it. And you've got this incredible studio that you record also, and you record tracks for people.
Yep. I do quite a bit of remote recording in here, and that's the nice thing about having a setup like this setup, is that you're not only able to teach, whether it's private lessons or group master classes, but all of that same gear can be used to record tracks for people. And like you said, the technology, the internet is gradually catching up so that we can start doing things similar to ways we would do them in person. It's never going to be 100% exactly like that, but there are things like Jam Kazam that I've been experimenting with a friend, so that we can get online, and it's poor audio, but we're able to hear each other back and forth and be playing real time with almost zero latency.
Yeah.
Which you're not going to do with Zoom or something else. And then as long as you're each recording your tracks locally, then you can Dropbox those after the fact, and you're doing a remote virtual recording, but you're jamming along with the guy, in a completely different city at the exact same time. And to me, that's like just incredible. And that sort of technology is just going to keep improving.
It's cut down a lot of the traveling too. I mean, where students have to kind of drive in for the lesson, if it's a half an hour or an hour drive to get to the lesson, and they do an hour lesson, and they have that half an hour to an hour drive back, they're kind of saving that time, that they're able to use that time for practicing at their own home. And as we talked earlier, we're looking at these students on their own kits. So you got involved with, now you're helping students tune the drums and setting up the drums. This is a whole nother world in how we're teaching.
Yeah, completely. I mean, you and I were chatting about this just before we got started. My friend Joe Mangus and I were discussing last year how things had changed when we started teaching lessons online. And the two biggies were exactly as you said. Suddenly, for the first time, we got to see and hear some of our students' drum sets.
Yeah.
And realize, we really need to talk about tuning, even if that's something we already had talked about. But in the drum studio on my gear, you realize, this student has not necessarily had me be able to walk them through some tuning ideas while they're on their own drums. Right. So that really helped just improving students' drum sounds. And you know how it is, like when your gear sounds great, it's more inspiring to sit down and play. So I immediately had students just going, oh yeah, I've been playing all week long, but my snare drum's amazing now. And then the second part of that is that we weren't necessarily all capable of operating a metronome by themselves, which seems ridiculous. But in the practice room, Joe and I had both had the experience of just having students play with the click and pulling it up on an app. And we, maybe I've told a student they need to download this app and they've seen me do it, but I've never made them sit and do it. And suddenly when we're on Zoom and me starting a click and having them play with it is just not realistic, I have them start pulling up their app to play it. And I realize there are parts of this that the student actually doesn't understand about setting up themselves. So that would even inform for me things that I would change if I were to do in-person lessons again. I would realize, okay, even if I'm operating this metronome, I'm going to make sure I can pass it over to my student once in a while and make sure she can do it as well. And not just assume that because they see me do it, that they understand the technology themselves.
Boy, it's just so great that you put this all together in the process. Talk about for a second about Floater, the band that you have that was actively playing before the pandemic.
Yeah, man, we can't wait to be playing live shows again. Floater is fantastic. I, for several years, still am, but I first started playing with the band's frontman, Rob Winia, in his own solo projects. And after playing for a few years with them, they were in a position where they got inducted into the State Music Hall of Fame, and they were just looking to get out and be playing shows more regularly than they had for a few years. And I was kind of in the family. I was already playing with Rob on his solo stuff, and I jumped on board with the band, and they're fantastic. They're mixes of psychedelic Pink Floyd-y type styles, along with some hard rock metal influences. And it's really been fun for me because it completely changed everything I was using gear-wise. So much change because I'm in Portland, Oregon these days, and the typical kind of what I call Portland drum set for me is my old vintage Yamaha, late '60s, early '70s kit. Kind of a cool brown willow finish, just kind of a very local Portland vibe. Not the drum set that was going to work with them. So I got to dig back into my old recording customs, which I've definitely played on and off over the years, and definitely by far my number one drum set of all time. I love those. And had to start upsizing everything. My cymbals got larger, my drumsticks got thicker, and I had to start playing double bass again, which I hadn't done since I had long hair as a little kid. Started triggering electronics, really getting into the SPDSX unit, and running some Ableton on a laptop on stage, and in-ear monitors with a little Kindle Fire to mix our own ears, and all of these things that I typically never had to do. And that band is just honestly one of my favorite things musically to do, because it's just a little 3-piece powerhouse. Once in a while we'll have a special guest as well, a keyboard player, a cello player, but it is just a band that can play super soft, amazing, subtle things and turn around and kind of rip people's faces off. So for me as a drummer, it's a workout every time I'm on stage with them, which is so much fun.
Well, how great that you've got that kind of variety of music that you're playing. And this is, are these cover songs? Are they original songs? What kind of music?
Yeah, Floater is essentially an original band, with the occasional fun cover that's just tossed in from time to time for the heck of it. But yeah, they have a huge catalog of music. I had the fortune right when I was coming on board to play drums on their latest CD, which is called The Thief. But they have a catalog of hundreds and hundreds of songs. I want to say maybe 12 or 13 studio albums plus some live albums. So I have still only scratched the surface of the catalog. A lot of the band's fans regularly request specific songs of me, wanting to see me play something that I haven't played yet with the band. But every time we go back out on another tour, it's great because we have that opportunity to kind of dig back into the catalog and pull some stuff out that is new to me, but maybe the band hasn't played in a while, and maybe the fans haven't heard in a while.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a treat.
Well, that's fantastic. Really fantastic. Boy, talk about the publishing. You got involved in understanding how to publish and assist other people with their books, as you did with my Cyclist Self Empowerment book. Tell that story about what drove you to want to learn to get involved in the whole publishing world.
Oh man, definitely was not a direct route, as so many of these things tend to not be. Getting into publishing was honestly a complete accident for me, because years ago I had picked up some rudimentary finale notation skills just so that I could type out a handout for my private students and things like that. And when I moved to the state of Oregon in 2006, I had very few students. I had zero gigs. And so I had a little bit more time than usual on my hands. And I decided that I wanted to improve those finale skills a little bit. So I actually we talked about Marv Dahlgren earlier. I actually took a book that he had handwritten and I had a photocopy of called Hi-Hat Control. And I just took his book and use it as a guinea pig, which, as you know, I've done with other things in the past. Like I'm always looking for some guinea pig, something to use to, learn a skill with. So I took his book, unbeknownst to him, and I sat down and I went through every single page of the book and I just notated it in finale. And there were a few little questions that popped up as I went along. But then I got to go back to Minneapolis and I had this amazing experience of getting to hand him this book with basically what still looked like his original cover at a lunch for his 83rd birthday. And at that table was Gori Knudsen, Dave Stanek, Marv Dahlgren, an old student of mine, Josh Rankin. And I gave him this book and he was like, oh, I haven't seen this in a while. And he opened it up and then realized it was all like engraved, all notated. And it was just a really cool, amazing experience. But sitting at that table, Stanik's name is just going to keep coming up over and over again in this chat. Dave was sitting at the table and he was like, let me see that. And he takes a look at the book for a little bit. And then he pulls me aside afterwards and he said, so I've got this drum book I'm working on. But here's the thing is he asked if he could hire me to come over to his house for a weekend and teach him how to use Finale. That was the plan. He wanted to type it out. So I flew to Minneapolis and hung out with him. He showed me the pages in, plastic sheet protectors that he was working on for this book. We sat down at Finale and I worked through kind of showing him some basics. End of story, until maybe 6 months later, I get a message from Dave again. And he says, yeah, so, I haven't totally gotten around to doing that. Like, can I hire you to just go ahead and notate the book for me? And that began, a long process of us working on the book together, which became, you asked me to pull some books out, so I got it. That became his book, Mastering the Tables of Time.
Absolutely.
And which is distributed by Alfred Music Publishing, Modern Drummer, 2009 Reader's Poll winner.
It's a fantastic book, and I use this with my students too. And David is a fantastic player and educator for sure. So this is so great that you were able to put that together. And the book looks so clean. So you did a great job with it.
Thanks. Yeah, I did notation on 139 of the 150 pages in the book here, and it was fantastic. I believe Hudson is now released the digital version of it, which is really cool.
Yes, they do. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. And so that became just the first of many times that Dave and I have been in cahoots on projects ever since then. And which was really great because I'd studied with him years before, and it was great to get to work as colleagues on a professional level. And then he later was asked to come on board and help Walfredo Reyes Sr. and Elliot Fine out because they wanted to collaborate on a book.
Yeah.
They had talked about doing this for a while, and they asked if Dave would come on as editor and kind of fuse their ideas together. And he said, yeah, if I can bring, this Mark kid along to, help out as well. So Dave and I worked on that. I did the notation and some editing. And then Dave and I had the huge honor of going down to Drum Channel down at DW Drums. Yeah. And we co-produced the DVD shoot for that with Walfredo Reyes playing, which was another experience that neither of us had ever done before. So we were just kind of thrown into director roles, for this shoot. And we had a 5-person camera crew that we were directing all of a sudden. It was interesting. But yeah, that just kind of snowballed because then I had the relationship with Alfred Music Publishing. Oh, actually, that's the Walfredo and Elliot book was the 2-in-1 drummer.
What a great book. And the fact that you were there to put this together with these guys is just so great that you captured Elliot's last book that he had that was just absolutely beautiful work of art.
Yeah, those two guys working together are just so amazing. There are a million stories from there, but that kind of developed some Alfred Music Publishing relationships. And so then later I pitched this wacky idea to Dave Black, who worked there, to do a follow-up to their Alfred's drum set method, which was their #1 selling drum set method. So we eventually teamed up on book 2 of that for Alfred Music Publishing. And then they published a book of mine called Solo in Style, which is just 6 drum set solos at the beginning to kind of early intermediate levels. And those really just came out of little solos I was writing for students of mine. And then after having this handful of solos in different styles, realized that, I could share them with other people if I kind of built some exercises around them and added a little bit more context.
Yeah.
So that was kind of really the introduction for me into publishing, which, like I said, was not something that I intended to do, but has been great. And since then, I've gotten into some more self-published sort of things. And that is something that I end up doing quite a bit of coaching of people who are working on their own books and either want to try to pitch them to publishing companies for what I'd call traditional publishing, or they just want to self-publish them and put them out themselves. So I think there are lots of pros and cons to both directions.
What's kind of interesting, with what you got involved with, what I love is the fact that you you saw something that was there. You weren't exactly sure what it was, but you really followed your passion and your instinct and your intuition to kind of push forward, learn finale, keep up with these ideas, and then you started self-publishing. Which, listen, this is what I did, and again, I had nothing in my plan of wanting to publish. But writing books was, as I was teaching, I was figuring out writing books, and I think this is something which every teacher can get involved in there. And your books, your kids' books that you have, I mean, I want to know more about them.
Oh yeah, that's so the self-published stuff that I mentioned are most of them are based around this character that I created, little Slammin Simon, and Simon has a little sidekick turtle there, and the turtle's name is Rudy, short for rudiments, and he's always reminding students that it's important to play slowly. And at the time of the first book, my girlfriend, who is now my wife, she is the illustrator of Simon and Rudy.
Mark, you brought her right into the family, man. Good for you.
yeah. She kind of got sucked into drum products. And these have really been a great experience on a number of levels. After I started getting into publishing, I knew that I wanted to do more of it. And I knew that some things that I put out weren't necessarily going to be a perfect fit with a traditional publishing company for a number of reasons. Like I said, there are pros and cons. Yeah. You have control of lots of things if you self-publish yourself that you wouldn't if you work with a traditional publisher. And so I knew that I wanted to be able to have kind of both avenues open to me. And I was taking a 4-month cruise ship contract in the South Pacific, kind of between Australia and Fiji at one point. And me being me, I knew I wanted to use some of my downtime that I knew I'd have to learn some skills. And I realized that I could use that time to learn how to make my own, paperback books for services like Amazon, but also learn how to convert files to make Kindle versions as well, so you could have the digital version. And that's when, I had reached out to you at one point and I said, okay, so here's the scoop. I love your book, Cycle of Self-Empowerment. It's one of my favorite books, forget a drumming level, just on a life level. I was at that time kind of a Stephen Covey fan. And when I read Cycles, I was like, oh, okay, here are a lot of these principles that I, like being brought in, but it's from the perspective of a drummer doing what I do. Like, this is just great. But as much as I love your book, I'm going super mobile right now. I'm downsizing, I'm dejunking, getting rid of stuff. So I remember jumping onto Amazon to buy the Kindle version of your book and load it onto my app, and there wasn't one. And so I thought, in the back of my head, I'm like, here's an opportunity. I want to learn how to make Kindle books. Dom doesn't have one. So I remember reaching out and just saying, like, can I get your book files again to use as a guinea pig, like I did with Marv's book for Finale? And if I can figure out how to make it into Kindle version, it's yours. I don't want anything for it. Like, I've gotten some education out of it. And if I can't figure it out, you're not out anything. If I can't, big deal. But I knew that I wanted to work on it on the boat. So it ended up getting on the boat and having downloaded all these tutorials, learning how to play around with stuff. And I learned things that I definitely never imagined went into, basically a little Kindle book. A digital book is essentially a website. You've got HTML and all these things in there. So I was learning coding and things like that. And now I know you've got that book in Kindle version, which it took several years before we got to that point, but it's so cool. But I knew that I wanted to develop that skill not only for myself and all my own future self-published books, because I didn't want to have to pay somebody, for a service to do that. I'm that DIYer. I like knowing how it works myself. But I also knew it would be a service that I could, supply other people with in the future. And I do a lot of book editing, helping with paperback production, helping with Kindle. And it's not something I advertise really online because selfishly, I also don't want to just do it for anybody. Almost, with only a couple of exceptions, almost every single product I've worked on has been some friend's drum books. And that's the way I like it. Like, I love helping other people in the drum world who have these cool ideas find a way to actually share them. And if they can do that in a self-published way, I'm all about helping make it happen.
Well, it really is fantastic. And as you've helped me out tremendously with my book, that it's available on Kindle. And listen, the whole world of where this is at now on Kindle, listen, you buy the hardcover book, it's got to be, you order it, it's got to be shipped, it's got to be mailed, there's a delay there. Listen, you go to Kindle, in 11 seconds, you've got the book.
Yeah.
It really is just that way. So how the world is changing, either we adapt to it or we kind of become dinosaurs to a certain degree. So what you're doing is really preparing yourself for the future of where drumming is going and, of course, where publishing is going.
Yeah, and honestly, that is another thing I like about the self-publishing through Amazon, because it is expensive to print out a book, whether it's paperback or hardcover, and then ship to somebody in a small town in Spain or something like that. It's not very realistic for somebody, even if they see it online, to be able to afford it. It's not very cost effective. And with the print on demand type services like you can set up with Amazon, it's great, because if I'm here and I order this book, they may print it at one of their locations in Seattle and I have it in 3 days for a local shipping charge. Mm-hmm. And if somebody in that small town in Spain orders the book, they may print it in Barcelona and they'll have it in 3 days at a local printing charge. Right. And so it's not actually crossing the globe to get there, and you save time, you save money, and you as an author, as an educator, are able to just get your ideas out to way more people than you ever would. And that, not only is just awesome because, we're spreading our ideas around the world more and more, but, on the financial side, it's great because you will get purchases that you wouldn't get. Just like having a remote studio allows you to get work from countries that you wouldn't ordinarily be able to get. And these days with these books, I've done a couple of them now, some drum set focus, some rudiment focus, one in Spanish. And at least a third of my sales every month are, overseas. And I'm always getting notifications at the end of every month, like the US dollar deposit I'm getting from Amazon and the British pound deposit I'm getting and the euro deposit. And it's great. It's a lot of fun. It's cool looking and going like, wow, somebody, ordered in Indian rupees this month. That's awesome. It's really cool.
But that's so great that you've embraced that, Mark. It really, really is. It's just so fantastic to experience, because this is really where the future is at. And either we adapt to it, and kind of welcome it and move forward. Or, as I said, even with teaching globally now, you're reaching students around the world. And plus you're doing these master classes where you do them, where you have your students and other students joining in to have a master class that you're giving. This is fantastic.
Yeah. It's an amazing time for that right now, because I can have students from anywhere tune in on the masterclass, but then I can also have guests from anywhere on the masterclass. Mm-hmm. I've been doing the masterclasses since last August, and beginning in September, ever since, I've had a special guest every month. And just this year alone, we started off in January with Dax Nielsen from Cheap Trick. He was hanging out with us. And last month, Tim Baltus, or Timbo from Kino on Instagram, he was hanging out and talking about a lot of his amazing ideas. This month we've got RJ, the drummer from Reverend Horton Heat. He's coming in on the 17th to teach a masterclass, and that just wasn't something that was very common. And so right now, between having the technology and many other people also kind of hanging around home and having a little bit more accessibility than they might if they were on the road, I'm just taking advantage of it and, trying to use it not only for myself, but just for other people, showcase different players.
Boy, it's really, really fantastic, Mark. We've got several players that have joined us even more. We've got players from Paraguay. Mike Kravitz is from Nevada. Artem Ikor is from Moscow. We've got Victoria's on here from the Ukraine, from Lviv. We've got look at this here. I'm looking at
Indonesia.
Yeah, we've got look at this. We got Indonesia. We've got Menos Pasialis is from Athens, Greece, and from a very, very far away culture, which people might not be familiar with, is Keith Dudek from Nashville.
Keith, love it.
Fantastic. I've had the chance to talk to Keith too. So I want to talk about your cymbals now. So you've been with Sabian for several years now. Talk about the cymbals that you have in your setup there.
Yeah, I mean, I'm recording, so they're constantly changing, of course. But right now, I love this guy. I have one of the big and ugly Apollo cymbals on here, which is just great. I mean, I'm just amazed. It always amazes me how thin these things are. The fact that this slide cymbal is just ridiculously flexible, and that's really great. And then equally dark and ugly and beautiful are these prototype hats that I have here, which were from one of the Meet the Masters tours. Actually, I think it was 2017 when Mark Love and the crew from Sabian was traveling around with their awesome little rig and they were hand hammering. You could take your own cymbal in and
they took the circus act on the road, man. They brought the machines, and it was just a brilliant tour and fantastic. But that's a fantastic cymbal that you got there.
Yeah, these are really, really great. And then a couple of legacy crashes on here right now, which are, I would say, my recording go-to for the most part. It was a line that I was not very familiar with. And then after I'd come on board with Sabian for a little while, a friend of mine let me borrow a couple for a tour that I was going on with Haley Johnson, a pop artist. And I remember like just wanting to steal his cymbals on the trip. I came back home and immediately was like, okay, I have to order some of these. These are really good. So yeah, they're just some of my favorites. I know you play the Legacies quite a bit yourself, right?
Yeah.
And then for fun, I've got a little 10-inch chopper on here right now. And then, yeah, pile of toys in here. I've got a couple of the HH Vanguards, which are really great for some jazz stuff. And sick hats and some. I'm often using some 13-inch AAX studio hats, which are cool. But I also love the old AA, like regular medium hats, just classic. So yeah, these things are changing a lot. With Floater, like I said, everything got bigger. The volume of that band just kind of requires more, and hitting cymbals like the Legacies as hard as I have to hit, is just not the right thing for the gig. So with them, I have like 18, 19, and 20-inch HHX Explosion crashes.
Nice.
In a bright finish. They're brilliant. And tend to use either the Groove hat and Groove Ride a lot, or also some of the I think the first set of gear I'd gotten after I came on board was a bunch of the stage gear, some of the stage crashes and stage ride. So those end up getting used quite a bit. But I am excited about this. If we have time, I actually just got a delivery of a couple things the other day, and I've been avoiding taking them out of the bags until we got to get together.
Let's see what you got.
I asked Chris Stenke for a couple of little studio sounds, and this is the HH Duo Splash.
Yeah.
Really cool. It's beautiful. I love the hand hammering in the center of these. It's so
beautiful. Beautiful.
So I'm excited to actually try that out soon. Another chopper, because when I first put in a chopper order years ago, my first Sabian order, I had requested a 12-inch, and the other Chris that I was working with at that time, before working with Chris Stenke now, Chris DeLisa, he was like, you know what, these are really, really cutting. Why don't you get the 10-inch? And then if it's not enough for you, I'll send you the 12. But the 10 might be cool, and it is. It's really, really cool. I use it quite a bit. But then I saw that there was an 8-inch out, and I'm not sure how recently this came out, but I hadn't noticed it till recently. So I just got a little 8-inch chopper, and these
are great.
Just really quick, trashy sounds.
How absolutely fantastic.
And I would say that, man, Sabian has stopped me several times from ordering something because of having an even better suggestion for that situation. There was a gig that I was going to order I was going to order the Chad Smith Holy China for at one point, and I got a call back, and Chris said, you know what? that's a killer china. You're probably going to love it. But for what you're telling me you're going to use it for, you should check out this Paragon. You know, it's pretty buttery, you know, but, you know, pretty cool. God, it's my favorite china ever. Like, it's so good.
And that's out of the mind of Chris Stanke, man. Chris Stanke is a brilliant mind. He's a phenomenal drummer. I've known Christian for many, many years, and he really is just has a phenomenal set of ears to know what sounds are right. And he's worked with everybody. He worked closely with Neil Peart.
Yep.
He's worked with every artist, Chad Smith, you name it, Bozio. And so he knows the sound so well. Really a brilliant mind when it comes to cymbals.
Yeah, he's awesome. I can't even open this right now, so you're not going to get to hear it. But the other studio toy I got was one of the sets of bronze bar chimes.
Nice.
So I've got a nice set of Tree Works, which I guess are aluminum titanium that, you know, I use for some session stuff. But I heard these bronze chimes one time, and they were so beautiful, just a little bit dark. So I really can't wait to put these to use too. So
boy, Mark, this is absolutely fantastic to have this kind of time with you and to be able to sit here and step into your world and into your studio is extremely exciting. I want everyone to know that they can go to your website, which is powerpercussion.com.
Yep, Powers Percussion.
And that's all there, so they can get all your books and everything. Everything will be on Powers Percussion, right?
Yeah, there should be at least on my bio in there'll be links to the Amazon author page where all the books are at and things along those lines.
And they can research this on Amazon with your name, Mark Powers. You've got your Facebook is Powers Drums.
Yep.
And then just Mark Powers for Instagram and Mark Powers for Twitter. You know, I want everyone to go there and just sign on, follow what Mark is doing, check it out. You can, you know, from his website, you can email him. You are a wealth of knowledge, and you really are this next generation that's taking this art form well into the 21st century. And it's an honor to know you, man. It's just so great to see as you've grown for all the years that I've known you. It's so wonderful to see that you are playing better than ever, and you're more active now with this crazy pandemic than ever before. Check this out now. Sabian, don't miss our members-only class with attorney Ron Beadstock on March 19th with a primer on music publishing and promoting yourself online while observing copyright of your own and other artist material. Log in to SEN for the link to register. That's fantastic. Bergamini organizes that, so we'll make sure we give that a plug for sure.
Yeah, well, man, I can't thank you and Joe enough for having me on. This is an absolute treat to get to hang out here.
Oh, I mean, it's fantastic, Mark. Well, I'd say so. I love being in your studio. Your studio looks fantastic. You play great. You're teaching great. You've got all this publishing stuff. You're writing great stuff. You're publishing great stuff. You really have, you know, worn all of these hats so well. And you are really, you know, pushing this art form forward by doing it all and having multiple income streams that allows you to still playing with Floater and doing your thing. So as this pandemic kind of winds down, you're going to be back in action at a high level. And this is very, very exciting.
I can't wait for that opportunity to get back into it and be playing on stages again. It'll be fun.
It's going to happen sooner than later. And I think it's going to be even bigger than what it was before because people are going to really appreciate the fact that now they're going to be able to sit down and enjoy live music. So I thank you so much. Stay well, stay safe, and we'll be in touch, all right?
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Mark. Bye-bye.